All right, good morning, everybody. I'm New York State Senator Jake Ashby. As it's nice to see everyone here, I don't want this to be an annual event. I want to solve these problems. I want to take the ideas from our great panelists today and bring them back to our colleagues in Albany and get to work. And this is a roundtable on affordability, and it was mentioned earlier, how serendipitous it was that we are having this event today. But this seems to be a long-standing issue, and I think for many of us here, it continues to linger, and in some instances, get worse. But first, I want to thank our hosts, Hudson Valley Community College, especially President Brophy, for your awesome operations team. They've been so responsive and truly a joy to work with. I want to thank our Senate Minority Media Services team, Tom, Kate, Bruce, and Mark. They do a great job day in and day out, but they really shine when we get away from the Capitol and have these great events with our community partners. I think everybody would agree. Sometimes things tend to get better the farther away we get from the Capitol. I want to thank my friends, Senator Dan Steck and Senator Jim Tedisco, for joining us today. I can't think of any pair of senators more relentlessly focused on affordability than them, and I'm looking forward to hearing their insights. Most of all, I want to thank our panelists who you'll be meeting throughout the morning. These are all very accomplished people. They are also very busy people, which is why we're trying to start and finish on time. They're taking time out of their hectic schedules because they care about their communities, they care about our state, and they want it to be easier for their neighbors to pay their bills and live a decent life. A quick word on format. Each panelist will provide us with up to 5 minutes of testimony and then 5 minutes of Q&A from my Senate colleagues. Just a couple facts to set the stage. A recent survey commissioned by the Public Policy Institute of New York State found that 2% of business owners believe that state government represents their interests. 2%. I guess they must have called Micron and 49 other businesses. Since 2019, New York's electric bills have increased about twice as fast as their wages. A new study from Columbia University finds that 40% of families can't afford their regular grocery bill, with the average family suffering a nearly $200 per month shortfall. 15 years ago, the average home buyer in America was 39. Now they're 59. Two categories New York State leads the country in over the last few years: outward migration and combined state and local tax burden. There might be a correlation there. What are you getting for all of those taxes, you might wonder? U.S. News and World Reports tell us we're getting the 20th best quality health care. We rank 33rd in educational attainment and 34th in infrastructure. Now, that sounds grim, right? But we are here collectively to make this better. And we are here as your state representatives to listen to you and to bring those ideas forward, not only legislatively, but for policy, and to work across the aisle to get this done. So I truly want to thank you for coming today, and I'd like to introduce the man to my right, Senator Dan Steck from the North Country.
All right, thanks, Senator. Good morning, everyone. Senator Ashby, thanks for pulling this together. I, too, am very interested in hearing what our panel has to say. I have a very large district. Jake and I share Washington County. I've got the northern bit of Washington County, but then my district continues up along the Vermont state line all the way to Canada and out west almost all the way to Ogdensburg. So it's a very large rural district. And I try to travel a lot, and I do that because this is where you're interacting with people, and you try to interact with a wide variety of people, so that you're not just hearing the choir or hearing a particular stovepipe or an interest area. And for years, the buzzword's been affordability, and now recently in Washington, that's become the new buzzword as well. But in Albany and specifically in the Capitol, we've been talking about affordability, and as Senator Ashby pointed out, we're in the bottom of the pack on a lot of rankings of our investments, but yet we are the very top of the heap when it comes to taxation. So we suspect we're not doing something well in Albany, and we've been vocal about that. But hearing from stakeholders and people that are working in industry and experts, what it does is I think it encourages us, and it also gives us a lot more credibility and confidence, that, hey, we've been hearing this from a steady representation of people. So thank you, panel, for being with us today, and I'm looking forward to our Q&A with you all. Thanks, Jake.
Stayed on time.
I'm working.
That was great. For reference and time, Nick, my chief of staff, is going to be in the back, and he will be providing reminders for time. So don't be afraid to look up and check in if necessary. Next to my left, longstanding state senator Jim Tedisco.
Thank you, Senator. I wasn't aware we had a time limit here. How much time do I have? Because I can.
You have some of Senator Steck's time. He was quick.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to thank you, Senator, and thank Senator Steck for allowing me to be here with them, and all of you for giving us this important input, because you're the individuals we need to hear, because there's a lot who have left who won't be talking to us about why they've done that. And for those of you from the media who are going to help us get our message out to the public. Sometimes I have too much time when I drive to these events, and they're important events, these meetings. And I'm thinking to myself about a song I used to hear, Blame It on the Rain. You ever hear that song? I always loved that song. But in New York State, we had a lot of rain, but you really can't blame it on the rain. Some of my colleagues, particularly on the other side of the aisle, like to say it's the winters and the bad weather we have in New York State. No, that's not the case. I mean, when I think it was 16% during the last census left the state of New York for New Jersey. I don't think they're the sunny, balmy place of the Northeast, actually, okay? We know there are different problems. And then I was thinking about a movie I love. Most of you must have seen the movie Casablanca, Claude Rains. I love that movie. I think I watched it 3, 4, 5 times. Humphrey Bogart's there. He's got this establishment. There's gambling taking place. The war's going on. And Claude Rains, who was, I guess, Captain Renault was his name, he's on the take. And he walks in there one day because they're closing in on Humphrey Bogart. He says, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. There's gambling in this facility. There's gambling in this establishment. I was kind of shocked when the governor came out this year, after being here for 5 years, having supermajorities in both houses, and said, did you know what? We have an affordability problem in New York State. Ladies and gentlemen, this problem has been in New York State for a while now, and it relates to an agenda that is simply holistically not working. 2022, the census. I had a good joyride on that one. They got to my house and they took it 1.5 miles out of it. They don't like people who get in their faces in New York State. And when they have the power to do things to you, they do it. Had to sell my house. And then I moved and built another one. I got back at them. I won by 25,000 votes in the next election. I make friends very easily because I think I work hard and I do a pretty good job. Number 1 in out-migration in 22 of all 50 states, 2022, New York State. One of 7 states that lost another congressperson. That's not the worst of the news. In 2032, by the demographic professionals, not me, not bipartisan people, we're projected potentially to lose 2, possibly 3 more Congress people who won't be standing up for us and speaking out for New York State. If anything sends a message, things aren't working in New York State. The agenda is not working in New York State. If I had a restaurant and people just stopped showing up, I'd say to myself, what am I doing wrong? My food's not that good. Well, the food's not that good in New York State in terms of keeping people here. You add taxes. I bought a long-term health care policy when I was 51 years old. The federal government said, you can get this, we'll make it a partnership policy. And when it gets to the 3 years, which you usually get, we'll pay along with the state of New York for if you live to the 4th or 5th or 6th years. My policy was $500 a year premium. Do you know what my policy is now? $4,000 a year in New York State for that policy. So it's not only taxes, it's insurance, car, health, number one in insurance, I think, or one or two in the state of New York. Some others may know better. It's just a whole variety of things that aren't working well for us in this state. And nothing could be clearer that we're failing in an agenda, that the fact that people are leaving. So I appreciate the opportunity to listen to you, but you can't make all these things a one-day story. We've got to continue to talk about the fact that people are voting with their feet. We're the Empire State. This continues, we're going to be the empty state. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I had a minute left, and I think I'm completed now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tedisco. First up on our panel, our host, President Michael Brophy of Hudson Valley Community College. And I will say I'm a little biased because I am an alum here of Hudson Valley. It's great to be back on campus, and welcome, President Brophy.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome back. And did you pick up your diploma on the way out? Did you? And Senator Tedesco, I was at Union last night, and I went to look for your records there on the basketball court.
I got 9 of them.
You still have some of those records, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I like to talk about it. You want to have a conversation? That's when I was tall.
Yeah.
When we won our league, we're the champions. We beat a very important team that we always like to beat, RPI.
RPI, I know.
We got the Dutchman shoes back.
Well, you're in Troy, so be wary here.
I know.
And Senator Steck, we're so glad to meet you, and I know I'm on your calendar soon. Looking
Yes.
forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
We have some street cred, my wife and I, because we lived in Canton for quite some time, so we got a little bit of street cred. We're really happy to welcome folks to campus to discuss this, obviously, most important topic. Many of you, I'm sure, either attended here or you have family friends who went here. And what I've come to find in my short tenure so far is that folks know us, they trust us, but they also depend on us in different ways. And I wanted to speak to that as part of our conversation. Two things, really. One is they depend on us to be working arm in arm with industry to make sure that the programs that we have meet the needs of the region. And in our case, we serve Saratoga, Rensselaer, and Albany counties. And many of you know that we work closely with companies like Global Foundries and Regeneron here, but there are many companies we work with, and many of the trades groups as well, who we work with to make sure we can get our students placed when they graduate as well. So that's something we take seriously, and anyone here today, if you have referrals for us to stay on top of that work, please catch me afterwards. And then we definitely depend on our elected leaders, both federally and state and local, and we need them to help us help our students. Now, for many of our students, maybe the more traditional age students, they come to us, and they may be in a place where they're able to stitch things together, and they know by coming to Hudson Valley that they have a wonderful journey ahead of them, but they've got to earn that degree. And they've got to, with their families, kind of take care of the bills along the way. And for many of our students, not all, but many of our students, they are lucky enough to receive state and federal financial aid that helps pay the tuition bills, but they still have to work. Our students on average work 20 to 30 hours a week, and they're stitching together the nickels they need for their gas tank, or if they live off campus, their rent and all those things. But for many of those students, they come out of a high school environment with their parents essentially serving as their safety net. But there are many students, I'm sure thousands of students here, who are coming to us from different walks of life and different times in their lives, and very often different crises in their lives. Students who may be coming to us in some phase of recovery from dependency, students who may be coming from us who have been incarcerated and coming back to be trained and to make a new life for themselves, students who are coming from some type of family trauma or tragedy. And for those students, that's where we really need everyone's help, because the federal and state aid does help them with their tuition and their fees and those kind of things that are related directly to Hudson Valley, but they're stitching together childcare. They're stitching together groceries, their car, their rent and all those things. So as we talk today, it's important for folks to just appreciate one more time that yes, we have to make sure that we are really delivering as a college training that helps students go out into the workforce and receive the types of jobs that help them take care of their families and thrive. But there are those 2, 3, 4 years sometimes when students are with us when there really is that social safety net that we rely upon to help and students rely upon to get to graduation. And so, Senator, I think I'll leave it there, but hopefully that kicks the ball onto the court.
Thank you, President Brophy. Next up, Brad Lewis, the Executive Director of the Troy Community Land Bank. Brad, thanks for joining us today. Oh, questions, I'm sorry. Brad, hold on. Questions from my colleagues to President Brophy.
This building is impressive, by the way. But briefly, your communications program, can you talk a little bit about it? I was, it was remarkable coming in the hardware that you've got on and around this building.
Thank you. Yeah, this is it feels new. It's not one of our newer buildings, but this building is two things. For Rensselaer County in particular, but for the Capital Region, it serves as a place where folks can come for conversations like this and know they'll get high quality support in communicating out to the community. And then for our students, yes, we have a first-class communications program, and those faculty work with our students in mentorship and help prepare them for different careers in multimedia. So thank you.
Yeah, impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Brophy, you had mentioned childcare as being an issue. What types of services do you offer here on campus, and how can the state be more helpful with that?
I think there's really two things, and many of us have had the joys and tribulations of raising children. For our students who are coming to us and they have their own small children, we have on campus a child care center which really helps a good number of our students, and all the help that we can get in supporting that, and we do receive different types of funds to help support that, are for their good. I think the other thing, though, that I want to share is that for many of those students, they're stitching together groceries. They're stitching together just how to pay the bills for their children, and so anything we can do to help many of our students, for example, receive SNAP benefits, for example. So things that help support our students as they're going here make all the difference. The real challenge that students might have, we don't want them to have, is to ever think about not being able to go to school or buy a quart of milk for their kids. Those decisions we'd like to think we'd want to take off the table for them through the support of state, local, and federal funds, knowing that if they're at Hudson Valley, in probably less than 2 years, they'll be contributing back to the state through their work and taxes.
Thank you. Senator T.
In our state, the parents are really honed in on going to college for kids. Got to go to college, got to go to college. Try to get a welder in this state. Shortage of nurses, welders, plumbers, those types of programs. If you were commissioner of education for the state of New York, in terms of a curriculum in our lower levels, what would you suggest to help deal? When we talk about affordability, we're talking about jobs. People have the skills, and the public wants to be able to relate to get to them. And plumbing goes bad, electricity goes bad, you need a welder, you need a nurse, shortage of those. Teachers, shortage of those in New York State. But in terms of technical and the shortages, what would you advise?
Yeah, I think the state does a good job in putting forward programs through its educational opportunity centers. And as you may know, Senator, those are programs that are tuition-free, and they're also short-term, including welding that we have here at our EOC Center on River Street in Troy.
On top of it.
Yes, but it's probably making sure the word is out as far as it can be. So for us, for example, if a student's in Rensselaer County, it's a different equation to get him or her to the EOC to take on welding, which we offer. If they're in Albany or Saratoga County, there's different challenges that we have to take care of, whether it's delivering programs in those counties or solving transportation issues. But it probably, it should be comforting to know the state has a good plan on the EOCs, but making sure they're able to meet the needs of all the community. Because not every student can take 2 years of life and set it aside. Those short-term programs that we offer, and certainly our BOCES partners do, but also the EOCs do, can make a difference.
Good point.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Some of the programs, they require, many of them, almost 5 years to go through the apprenticeship process. And, you know, what we've seen now is the process being started earlier in high school. And Hudson Valley has been a part of that. And they're starting to capture students at a younger age. Do you see that expanding currently the way that it is, or would you like to see it deepen, getting the kids to begin these programs even earlier? So that way, you know, when we're looking at workforce shortages, if it's taking 5 years to go through this process, if it's taking, you know, for the trades, for healthcare, for teaching, right?
Yeah.
In order to fill those vacancies more efficiently and quicker, would it be better to start earlier, or do you see it really trying to capture the current population as it stands within the current policy?
I think thank you, Senator. There's no doubt that in one way, technical training is enjoying the culture curving towards it. And people are really appreciating what it means for students to get technical training earlier on. Of course, decisions that the state has made policy-wise with the Regents diploma, for example, is a good one in that it allows students and parents to think beyond just one solution for their high school degree. Locally, just for an example, I've been able to meet with most of the superintendents, but Averill Park is a good example of a school district that is really focused on deepening downwards technical training within its district. And because of where it is and who we are, we'll be a big part of that. And so in closing, many of you are aware that we've broken ground on the Applied Technology Educational Center here on campus that will open in 27. That will be two things. It'll be a place for training for sure for our students, but we also plan on it being a center for secondary education throughout the region in order to make sure that they can deepen within their school settings technical training.
Any other questions? Brad. I want to welcome Brad Lewis, Executive Director of the Troy Community Land Bank. Thanks for joining us today, Brad.
Thank you, Senators Ashby, Steck, and Tedisco, for the opportunity to speak and for your continued support of land bank initiatives across the state. As you guys know, the land banks are funded through HCR and the Land Bank Initiative funds administered by the Housing Trust Fund Corporation. So largely land banks are a state-funded mechanism to solve the unaffordable housing problem in our state. So I want to share a little bit about land banks. Land banks exist to take properties that are private developers and municipalities can't handle. When I say that the buildings are burned out, abandoned, left to deteriorate, or eventually become demolished, they become the city or the foreclosing governmental unit's responsibility for that building. Land banks can step in when no one else will. We solve the problem of blight and turn these properties into productive parcels. In Troy this past year, we saved 3 buildings that were scheduled for demolition. Engineers came in and said these buildings need to come down because they can't math it out on how it would work. Rather than incurring a demolition cost, we came in and we stabilized it. We asked the fire departments to come in and say, what's wrong with this building that you feel unsafe to go in? Once we did that, it was safe for engineers to come in and design the building back to its original productive use. We stabilized them, we're returning them to productive use. Our work's being done at about $150 per square foot. New construction's about $200 to $300 per square foot. But engineers and architects can't math out an old building because they don't do balloon framing anymore. They're not used to old timbers that maybe have a little bit of water damage, and they can't make sure that these buildings are safe. Even though the old housing stock in New York State is built pretty redundant. They might, instead of having buildings 16 inches on center, they might be 12 inches on center. Instead of using a 1.5-inch 2x4, they used actual 2x4s. So the strategies that they built in the past were overbuild. Now we're engineering stuff to a place where it is, saving dollars by limiting the materials that are going into the buildings by mathing it out appropriately. So it's worth remembering that this is old housing stock. People have left New York State, and when they left, the jobs left, and so the housing stock wasn't invested into. A building that's in Troy right now that needs to be demolished might cost the municipality $50,000 if its owner abandons it. Land banks start with that negative $50,000. We're coming in, it might be more than that. I mean, in Troy, the Hot Dog Charlie's and Trader Joe's buildings were demolished, I think, to the tune of $100,000. So the cities absorb that cost. They try to put it on the tax bill. They don't recover it. They end up owning a vacant lot instead. Now, some of these buildings are deteriorating to the point of being marked with an X, a red X, and it signals much more than danger. It tells firefighters don't enter the building. There's a structural issue that if you go to fight a fire, you might fall through and it could hurt our safety personnel. It also signals to neighbors in the area that the area has been given up on. People don't want to invest there. It's not worth it anymore because even private investors won't take it for free to fix it. Getting those buildings stabilized and safe enough for even a potential investor or an architect to walk through is part of the Troy Land Bank's mission. Even when the demolition is necessary, we can do that. We can clean title. We can resolve years of back taxes and prepare sites for redevelopment. And Senator Ashby toured Habitat for Humanity project on Park Avenue when they're building 4 units of owner-occupied housing using modular homes. It was done because the land bank prepared the site, did lot line adjustments, and was able to then sell the land to Habitat so they could do that project. Now, not all land banks operate the same. In Troy, we self-manage. We try to be a little more nimbler in using local contractors, but in that, part of that is to get the payments to those contractors early and often. As progress is made and milestones are made in the projects that we're working on, we try to get those contractors paid as soon as possible. Larger firms can absorb the large receivables on their balance sheet, but smaller firms sometimes don't have $100,000 in cash to wait for a payment to be made. So when you have a large developer working, they usually have to pad in about 50% is what I'm seeing between interest and carrying costs before they can make a final draw on a final payment on a large scale project. With the LBI funds that are afforded to land banks, we're able to get milestone payments and pay our contractors quick and often so that way they're not carrying the interest and other fees that go with it. That being said, we have a $450,000 progress payment that we just took a request on November 10th. I know timely payments are a topic that I think are very important. We're waiting on that now. We are approved for it, but it hasn't hit our account as of this morning. But that draw will allow us to pay our contractors. And, we don't have a lot of money in the land banks. We're not set to make money. Profit's not our motive. Our goal is to make housing, make units of housing, and restore buildings and parcels to productive use. So when we have quick payments, it enables more contractors to compete for land bank work, which reduces the rehabilitation costs of the projects and also reduces those costs to both the state, because land banks are state funded, and also the communities, because those communities don't have to see blighted buildings in their neighborhood. So our work turns liabilities into assets, and it improves safety and protects neighborhoods, creates dignity, makes people feel more self-esteem with the cities that they're in and the neighborhoods and blocks that they live on. So I thank you guys for the opportunity to share, and I just wanted to share what we're doing at the land bank, and I think that your continued investment in land banks is going to generate a lot for housing.
Well, we really appreciate you being here, Brad, and thank you for your efforts. And the word nimble and this type of bureaucracy sometimes don't go hand in hand, but you do, you and your team, you do a great job there. And I was thinking about looking back at the construction or the fabrication of those homes in Troy and watching those cranes move in such tight areas. That was nimble.
that was a good example of it. So questions from my colleagues?
Brad, thanks for the work that you and land banks are doing across the state. Well, like anything, and we're familiar with, issues surrounding government, state bureaucracies, hurdles. And, that's important. You want checks and balances, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to make sure that things are done well. And we can all think of examples where you say, well, oversight would have been good there. But I know that sometimes we drift away from a good balance. So your experience, managing the land bank that you do, like what would you see that the state could do differently, to make it, flow better, more efficient, to take that dollar. Ideally every dollar I would love to see go into actual rehab and construction, but obviously, that's not the case. So, are there some things that you would suggest to us that, hey, if the state did this a little different, we could make that dollar go into more square footage of living space?
Yeah, I think the big issue right now with land banks, and I think you all represent land banks in your districts, and so I think acquisition is going to be a hard thing. And it's odd enough that I say that because the state law changed on how tax foreclosures work. Foreclosing governmental entities are able to take properties that are tax delinquent. And I think empowering code departments and cities to impose vacant building fees that are high enough that force speculators off the properties that aren't in productive use right now. And with that being said, a lot of code departments in cities are sitting in court without reimbursement and paying their code officers to deal with fines that don't cover the code officer's work. So I think the state could address that issue, the vacant building issue. But as it relates to HCR, I think the LBI money is very good money. I mean, when I mean that, the money that's going into land bank initiative, capital improvements, I think is being very efficient. I think that it is good to increase the timeliness of the payments. I think they've done a great job at that, but there has been times when I've had to send an email out once or twice afterwards. And it's mostly, I think they maybe don't have the same staff working on that right now. And that might be an administrative thing, less a legislative thing. But I think continued investment in the LBI funds and doing what we can to increase the velocity of the investment of funds. Right now, it takes us about 6 months to get a building or a lot or a parcel approved for the funding. And that's just the environmentals, and these are existing buildings, but we have to do, floodplain maps and, SHPO, and all those people have been helpful. All the agencies have been helpful, but there is a lot to getting even the first dollar out the door.
Thank you.
Yeah, of the issues you just mentioned, we see a lot of legislation. We don't know all the legislation that's pending. But of the several issues you mentioned, is there anything pending legislatively that we could look at to help you with that would cover some of the issues that you've just mentioned, or the ones that are in the back of your mind? Anything pending you know of, or if we had to do legislation, what would be at the top of your list, realistically, I mean?
Yeah.
More funding or?
There is an element where I described the $450,000 progress payment we're waiting on. And the land bank in Troy, when I started, had $30,000 in the bank. So owing $450,000 out and having only $30,000 when I started 2 years ago, roughly, it's hard to tell contractors to hold on. So I think making sure that money keeps flowing is good. Now we have a little bit more money, but I just had to take out of our cash reserves $100,000 to pay some contractors that I know are struggling, but they've completed the work and they're just waiting. The turnaround time between me putting in a request, the money coming in, and me being able to then write the check after getting approvals from our treasurer, it can be hard on a small, especially minority-owned businesses and very small contractors who don't have lines of credit to cover that. So
We know a lot about waiting. Senator Ashby knows a lot about waiting. He represents the Veterans Committee. How about that money that's not flowing for the veterans? These are important people. We want to keep them in New York State too, and we got a lot of programs. Well, you can explain that better than I can, but I know it's an issue for you because, yeah, we got to get the money out the door. Okay, thank you.
Just to add one idea that I did have in the back of my head was, I think that if the state was able to have people out there that actually have construction knowledge that can go to sites instead of third-party independent verifiers, you might find that the state having people that can say, hey, this project is moving forward. Yes, they are, the windows are in, the foundation's fixed, the chimney is repointed, those sort of things. They might find that they're able to verify and eliminate, the potential. I mean, I know that the barriers are to eliminate fraud, but at the same time, this is very tangible, hands-on stuff. It's not billable hours of, say, childcare where you don't know if the child was there or not. And, we're constructing actual things you can touch and see.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice for the state to have a basic comprehension of certain industries. And you would think that would be the standard. So I thank you for sharing that, Brad. Any other questions? All right, next up, Abby Kovacic, the Executive Director of Bright Side Up. Abby, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for including childcare in these concerns. Often childcare is thought about after the fact, and so we're delighted that we were invited to be here today. When we think about childcare in New York State, across the country, it really does present us with a sort of a three-pronged dilemma: affordability, access, and quality. And those are the three prongs that really speak to a lot of the work that the child care resource centers across the state address. So Bright Side Up, formerly known as the Capital District Child Care Coordinating Council Incorporated, is one of the child care resource centers funded through the Office of Children and Family Services. There are 36 of us across the state. So each of the regions has a child care resource center. My friend Lynn Sickles from Warren and Washington counties is the executive director of the Southern Adirondack Child Care Network. And she couldn't be here today, but we have a great partnership with her. And so when we think about affordability, it's more expensive for a toddler or an infant to go to child care than it is to send your freshman to Hudson Valley Community College. And so that's difficult for parents who are often at the beginning of their careers to afford childcare. In New York State, we do have childcare assistance. Each of the county Department of Social Services distributes childcare assistance based on the family's need. Currently, the qualifying benchmark is 85% of the state median income. Some of our counties currently are out of funding. Not out of funding. They have funding, but it's already been allocated. So new applications aren't seen. So in Rensselaer County and in Saratoga County, in the region that I work in, that's the case. And so we have many families who are seeking childcare assistance in order to afford childcare, but are unable to get that. So it's very difficult to afford childcare. And if we had a group of families here, they would likely say that's one of the biggest burdens that they have. Families get through the first 5 years of their child's life, and then they breathe easy. They're like, God, we've made it through childcare. And so affordability is a really big concern for New York residents. It's unaffordable to send your child to childcare. Access to childcare is difficult across the whole state, but in rural communities, it's almost impossible. And so in 1976, I believe, the New York State Office of Children and Family Services started licensing family childcare or group family childcare homes. And so those are regulated individuals who care for children in their own residence. And that is the go-to type of child care for individuals who are working or living in rural communities. It's easier for families to access it because travel often between child care centers is great in a rural community. And so That we have been finding a decline in family child care homes, primarily because people who were licensed in the 70s are retiring. And so we have the great retirement as well. And new child care providers are not entering the field at the same rate. Now, in the capital region, both the Bright Side Up and also the Southern Adirondack Child Care Network did receive a federal grant out of Luis Stefanik's office, where we were able to recruit family child care providers in Saratoga and in Warren County with the Warren County Economic Development Council. And we were able to recruit, in Saratoga County, we recruited 10 immediately. And then we were able to massage the budget a little bit to get 6 more. So we'll have 16 new family child care providers in Saratoga County. It's been a little bit harder in Warren County to get that same 10 providers, mostly because of the population isn't quite as dense as it is in Saratoga County. So population density and child care are sort of connected. And so accessibility has been a difficult thing. Sometimes when families call the child care council to get child care, we were unable to help them because there isn't anything licensed or regulated in their community. We'll work with them to find family, friend, or neighbor individuals who we will then help to start a child care program given their interest. And then when we think about quality is a concern. Finding people who are qualified to work in a child care setting is difficult. The SUNY and CUNY schools have been essential in that. If we can get a Hudson Valley graduate, we're lucky. They're well prepared to be in the early childhood setting, as are many of the programs that are in community colleges. But we need to support those programs in order to continue to offer early childhood education. An early childhood educator doesn't make a lot of money. So when we think about economic development and job development, often early education is left off the table because they're not going to likely make a lot of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, just want to ask you about the self-reporting system. How does that operate now? And do those disclosures impact insurance rates in terms of self-reporting?
Self-reporting for taxes, do you mean?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Or do you mean for licensing requirements? Yes, you mean for licensing requirements. I get it. So yes, so when a child is, when a licensing regulation is of concern. So if a child was left unsupervised, or if there was an injury to a child in a program, the individual has to self-report to the Office of Children and Family Services that they had this concern in their program. And recently, liability insurance companies have been pulling their insurance from the child care provider. The Office of Children and Family Services is aware of this, and they have contacted insurance companies and have given them direction on how not to take that insurance away from the family child care provider. So yes, it has.
Is that getting trending better or trending worse?
I think it's trending better. I think insurance companies completely understand what a licensing concern means, because a licensing concern doesn't always mean that the children are at risk. It means that they broke a regulation. So you might have a regulation that's been cited as not being followed, but it's not putting children directly at harm.
Now, I've toured child care providers, locations in my district over the years, and I've got a very large district, so I have some small urban, suburban, but a lot of rural. Do you find that is there a one-size-fits-all approach from the state on what the requirements are? Like, I've got a lot of people that would like to provide in their home, And the regulators come in and they're like, all of a sudden, you've got to, they're asking them to spend $100,000 to fix up, and bring to some sort of standard and code. And I get it, right? I mean, you want to have a bar to say, hey, we're watching people's children. There's got to be, but not everything has, not all buildings are created equal. Not all, situations are the same. And so are you finding that there's a one size fits all mentality at the state that is prohibiting smaller rural providers as opposed to somebody that's going to rent retail space in a plaza or something in a more urban setting?
So that's an interesting question. There are different regulations for centers versus family child care, group family child care homes. So family child care and group family child care space requirements are a little bit easier to manage. It's much easier to license a family child care home and a group family child care home than it is a child care center. It's very complex to license a child care center. And so I would say that often there are some improvements that have to happen to the home. And currently, Stefanic's grant pays for some of that for the people in Saratoga and Warren County. And we have a grant in the city of Albany through the TUI Foundation that does that as well. So people do need assistance with that. One of the things, housing is a big deal when you're looking at. So sometimes housing in many parts of the state don't meet the requirement for licensing. So some people who want to care for children in their home can't do it because of the state of the housing. And so we have talked a little bit about allowing, in some communities, family child care homes to be licensed in non-resident locations, like a classroom in a school that's available to the community. So those kinds of things, the regulations would have to change in order to accommodate that, because not everyone who wants to provide childcare lives in a home that meets our standards.
Do you get a sense, though, that there's a willingness at the agency level to, like, there's an awareness and a willingness to change? I know that sometimes bureaucracies, the nature of them are, oh no, we're good. We don't need to change. We've got this right. Or do you think that they realize they need to evolve a little bit?
No, I think the Office of Children and Family Services currently is very invested in trying to figure out the child care conundrum and is aware of the concerns and is open to suggestions.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other reasons that you can think of why you're seeing the decline in family child care homes other than the housing and the aging out?
I think that, regulations can be a little difficult for family child care homes. They want to care for children in their home, and so regulations can cause them to have background checks and fingerprinting and things that they weren't accustomed to. And so that may be some of the things that there's a lot of hoops to jump, and people may be like, oh, that's a lot of trouble. I think I'll care for 2 children and be unlicensed, only 2 children and be unlicensed.
I see.
So that could be part of it, yeah.
Well, thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Mayor Marsh,
How are you? Sorry I'm late, everyone.
that's okay.
One
Thanks
thing they don't tell you in politics is you have to be ready to do quick costume changes. And so half hour ago, I was literally staring muddy in a hole, looking at some broken infrastructure. So, and here I am. So,
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to do it. Costume changes can be tougher in the winter.
yes.
But we can move quicker through it because of it as well. So thank you for joining us here today. Mayor Brian Marsh, Mayor of the Village of Menands.
So I believe one of the things that you wanted me to talk about is water and wastewater and how that it can impact businesses. I'm sure members of this panel have heard recently that Regeneron has decided to invest in a facility in Saratoga County, putting $2 billion in a manufacturing campus up in Half Moon. And initially, we had hoped for sure that was going to be in the village of Menands at a site that they recently acquired. Unfortunately, that particular site is in a 100+ year floodplain. So where do you put $2 billion? Generally, it's not in somewhere that can flood. Has it ever flooded? Flooding is an interesting word. We would tend to disagree that it actually flooded from the river. It was more the fact that the culvert and stormwater transmission system to get the water out of our community and to the river was inadequate to handle some of the storms that we had in, the mid 2000s. And so that was really the reason why water had backed up. And, so there's this conflict of whether you actually call it flooding or whether it's simply stormwater. Unfortunately, it added, I believe, to their decision to invest in Saratoga County instead of staying in Albany County as we had hoped. So we're still trying to work with them to figure out how they can maximize that particular site in our village and make use of their acquisition there. I don't think it's still set in that it's a $2 billion miss. But I definitely would have loved to have that come to the village of Manans. So stormwater is definitely something that I think that we're going to see a bigger impact on in the next 10 and 20 years. The forecast for climate change, it has the Hudson River generally rising by inches, if not a foot, over the next 30 years. So how we manage the stormwater situation, which can impact especially the city of Albany when there's a rain event and the stormwater and wastewater system, because of the infiltration of stormwater into the wastewater system, it's really overtaxing the wastewater system for Albany County. So essentially they have to let water process through their facility much faster and leads to less treatment of that wastewater. And so the frequency of discharge events that enters into the Hudson River is increasing over the over the years. So that's something that I think Albany County is investing $200 million through some bipartisan infrastructure money through the federal side, and they, over the next 3 to 5 years, hope to improve that capability. As far as Manans goes, I can tell you that attracting businesses, for instance, Regeneron had a large need for water for the particular manufacturing that they wanted to do that is now going to Saratoga County. And so that was a big ask of us when they wanted to make sure that they could have adequate flow per day for clean water that they then synthesize into their pharmaceutical products. So we were glad to see that we were able to handle that need, but if we hadn't, we would have invested nearly millions of dollars to attract them to come to Manans, just to satisfy their need, both on the water and wastewater side. So those are implications, I think, for any municipality when they're courting these larger manufacturing and other users of utility services that that are constant battles. We have a business growing in Manans that is concerned about power redundancy, and so is the electrical grid capable of providing them with adequate power? So we've been working with National Grid to make sure that, for instance, their secondary site that they're now putting in Manans is on a separate, I guess it's a node. Gavin would know better than I am. But it's a separate node, so that if one goes down, they're still able to manufacture at their secondary site. And so I'm hoping that we'll have an announcement on that today for another expansion in Manans. So that's kind of my 2 cents on utilities. So any questions from anyone?
Well, thanks, Mayor. Questions from my colleagues?
Yeah, Mayor, as a municipal official, all right, you got 3 state lawmakers here. If there was one bureaucratic process or law or mandate at the state level that you could modify or repeal or replace or reword, is there something that jumps out at you, that the state could do differently that you think on behalf of a village or a local government in general, you'd say that would move the needle?
The recent backing off of the electrification of building, and that requirement is surely something that I think needs to be phased in and instead of just slammed in everyone's, plans. As a realtor and a rental property owner myself, I know that it's, I own 22 properties, and to make all of those buildings retrofit for electric would be impossible. I'd have to bring in, new drops for every building that I own. I understand that it's necessary. I just think it needs to be a blended approach that is economically feasible, and the same goes for the commercial side of infrastructure with businesses. The grid it needs some investment, and we have to all understand that investment costs money. So how do you balance the cost of upgrading that infrastructure, across the spectrum of utility users? And that goes whether it's, electricity or water or wastewater, even trash and recycling infrastructure. That's a utility.
Yeah.
And the problem is, and the problem that I'm facing, and why I was standing in a hole with mud on me and a broken pipe in front of me, is that, over the years, we have not made adequate investments, incremental investments in this. We built it, and it was amazing, and then we forgot about it. And, our country was great at building amazing things, and then we forgot about the need to maintain them. And that's the reality of what we're facing now. And, you hear about municipalities in other parts of our country who face crisis over water and wastewater, we have to be better than that. We have to invest constantly. And the mirage of that inflation is 2% a year, sometimes it just isn't. The costs are the cost. And if you don't invest in it now, it's going to be 10 times more expensive down the road. And that's just the reality of it. So if we ignore it, we're only moving that burden down the road. So let's stop doing that. Let's have honest conversations on either side of the aisle about the things that we need and when we need them. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And you're not preaching to the choir here only, because we all had local experience. I started out as a city councilman, so now I know exactly what you're talking about. You're one of the most local government, mayor, city council, county legislators. Difficult job. You're right there. Constituents are in your face. And we're talking about affordability here. And one of the last discussions from our administration is that we're all going to get $200 or $300 checks in the mail. Well, I'll be able to get a new charger for my phone, take my spouse out to dinner, pay somebody to mow my lawn maybe, so I won't have to do it every week or so. But that's not going to solve the problem of affordability. I want to ask you a question in reverse here. What do you think you do well locally that we could put into our concept of what we could do at a state level and replicate some of the things that our local government officials do, like balancing a budget maybe, but we all know that should be done here and on a federal level and in a timely fashion. We don't always live up to that, and local governments don't either always live up to that. But something you think might be what you do locally as a mayor or your government.
Well, it's I don't know how you do it. I guess I'm glad that I don't have that responsibility. I can tell you that much, that the things that I do locally are easier to fix. It's a lot of times it's simple math, and I don't think $200 is really going to be helping anybody much. So, investing in things, programs, if for instance, that make common sense. If we can give people some affordable childcare, they can work. If they can work, they can better their economic outcome, and they can more They're more able to afford the things that they need every day. If they're working, and their child is more likely to succeed in school, to keep the cycle going. So, investing in the smaller things often pay some of the biggest results long term. And that it's the end of gimmicks. Let's face the things that we need to invest in and invest in them. Again, I'm not really answering your question well, but I don't have an answer. I'm just glad that I can communicate with my senator and all of you and advocate for those things when the time comes when we do need something locally, and you can transfer that up the chain, it all is local. So even the things that you're doing, are have an impact on us locally. So not sure I answered your question.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for that, Mayor Marsh. And to help respond to that question, working across the aisle is something that I think you do very well. We have a great relationship, and I know that I see that elsewhere within the city or the village of Manans and in the surrounding river cities, and that is something that I think is missing in Albany. So to Senator Tedisco's question, what do you do well within your local government that we could do better in New York State? Your presence here is an answer to that question. And how you conduct yourself and the leadership that you provide within the village of Manans and elsewhere throughout those river cities, I believe is evidence of it as well.
It's the Breakfast Club, Green Island, Waterville. I'm getting Troy on board. Albany is sure with their new mayor is I think going to be as engaging, if not more so than Mayor Sheehan. So we do have a good group that we all call on each other. Bill Keeler from Cohoes. So it's a good group, and you're right. We reach out to each other all the time. If it's to say hello, I like your hat, Charlie, or for something that's on Facebook. You have to have that type of relationship amongst you and your peers across the aisle, for sure.
Thank you, Mayor Marsh.
Thank you.
Next up, Pat Torino, President of the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, Local 2, and newly named President of the Building Trades.
Yeah, so good morning. My name is Pat Torino. I am the president of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, Local 2, New York, and recently I became the president of the Greater Capital Region Building Trades, where I represent 16 trades and 22,000 workers. So I've been challenged with that in the last 3 months, and we have a bunch of new initiatives started, and I'm very thankful that you invited me to spend time here with Senator Ashby, Steck, and Tedesco for being part of this conversation. I never thought I'd be sitting in front of 3 Republicans and being on the same path of success for our people, and I do appreciate that opportunity. I was struggling with the fact, being here, what do I say? So you guys have asked me, how do we encourage more workers to get into the trade? So I did write a few notes down. So let me start by saying all of the unions I represent have an accredited apprenticeship program registered with New York State Department of Labor. They all have a work process report card, also known as a blue book, and a training curriculum in their respective trades to ensure that they are meeting the goals set forth by the Joint Apprenticeship Training Committee, also known as the JATC. The JATC is comprised of employers who represent management and unions who represent the workers. In order to attract and encourage workers into the trades, must have the work available to them. They will provide a good living wage that includes benefits such as health care and a pension so that they can retire someday with dignity. All of our programs provide safety training so they ensure that those workers go home to their families. One of our top priorities has always been safety. So when I meet with our apprentices, as the president of the Bricklayers, I was also the coordinator for apprenticeship program. I take the opportunity to meet all of our new students every year And after a few weeks, I start talking to them about safety. And I posed the question, who's in charge of safety? So if you just ask a young person who's in charge of safety, you're going to get the usual answers. Oh, it's the safety officer on the project. It's the contractor. The simple answer is you. And the reason why I say it's you is because I let them take the responsibility for their own lives. If they see something unsafe, say something. Take the situation seriously and make a decision. Even if you're a young apprentice who absolutely knows nothing about safety, they leave our programs with minimum 30 hours of safety training so they can go home to their families and then have a career down the line. So we spend a lot of time and resources at BOCES programs. We have 3 instructors that train some of these students throughout the area here, Saratoga BOCES, for an example, and Schoharie. We recruited apprentices from those 2 areas, and ironically enough, the Schoharie kids that come in there, why they don't have a football program is beyond me. They'd be state champs because they're all monsters out there, and strong, strong kids. And every one of those kids that comes to our program, very successful. They have that work ethic built in them. Same thing with Saratoga. So we provide that, and we also attend a bunch of career days in high schools where we educate teachers and guidance counselors on apprenticeship programs that we offer. And of course, none of this would be possible without the help of our partnerships with the employers. You know, if the key to our success is to encourage people to enter the trades, we need work for them. And we don't do that without partners in business. We understand that. And we all hope that these projects are bid, responsible bidders that are going to take these things seriously with the wages and benefits and safety, so then our apprenticeship programs can thrive and put people to work. You know, when you do that type of thing, you're creating a community of young adults, maybe with the opportunity to expand, maybe buy a house, go to the banks and that kind of thing, and get involved with the community. So you guys have all heard that, you know, time is money. We've all heard that. So employers, contractors, and companies all have that as a mission statement, and I would too if I was a company owner. I also have a saying, if you have the money, we'll make the time. What I mean by that is, if developers and owners want to expand and build new projects, we will train them, find workers for those projects. I do want to thank you for inviting me here and taking the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. And obviously, if there's questions you would like to ask me, we can always use help at your level on prevailing wage topics or definition of public works projects, those kind of things. Where you guys can be part of helping us help the communities. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Pat. Really appreciate you being here, and I'm very grateful for, you know, the friendship and relationship we've been able to have over the last few years. And I had asked a question to President Brophy earlier about bringing youth into the trades, and I know this has been an important effort for your team. Do you see the current policy and programming of going into the high schools, you know, starting at that junior year, do you see that as sufficient with the workforce shortages that we have, but the growth of the trades that we've seen? Or do you think we should start earlier than that? Do you think that there could be, that we're missing out in trying to capture that population earlier? Do you think that could be effective?
Yeah, so we tackled that very issue 3 years ago. And being involved in all the BOCES programs and the high school programs, we thought there might be an opportunity for juniors that were going into their senior year to have a summer school program that we now have. It's our 3rd year. So we train our juniors that come in and seniors. So before they even have an opportunity, so the way we're set up is our training is in the wintertime, but the work is in the summertime. So if our juniors are coming in, obviously we're not going to put in the work yet because they're going to go to school. And in the last 3 years, we recruited about 4 juniors that were kind of guided to going towards the trades. So by the time they came to their senior year, the 2nd year of summer school, by September, they were at work. So to answer your question, yeah, we feel the need to recruit younger people. And just recently, we had 27 students from Albany High School come into our training center And four of us, including myself, put trowels in their hand, and we saw how excited they were to be learning a trade. And all of them had the opportunity to comment on us, and the reports that we got back were they were very excited that trade existed, because some people don't even know it exists, or any other trade. So to answer your question, I do believe there is a need to get to the students earlier. Nothing against anybody going to college, don't get me wrong, but a lot of kids don't go to college, and rather than trying to find their way, we just open up a door for them if they want to use it.
No, it's a great point, and it's a great nexus here, you know, between the trades and Hudson Valley Community College, and not going to college, not being in debt is a good thing, especially when we're here talking about affordability and gaining a skill that you can monetize for the rest of your life and serve your community. I mean, that's what you're propelling there, and that's what Hudson Valley Community College is doing here as well. Questions from my colleagues?
Sure. Pat, thank you for your testimony. I'm excited about all those safety proposals and the safety features you've helped put in place. I represent the 44th Senate District. I like to say all good things emanate from the 44th Senate District. I just happen to be the senator there. But it's Saratoga County and Schenectady County. Economic development in Schenectady County was one thing many years ago. My father worked in the foundry at the General Electric for 30 years. My grandfather worked at machine repair there for 40 years. 40,000 people were employed there. That was economic development, the General Electric. Well, those days have passed. But at that time, no real OSHA regulations were in place. The foundry could best be described as a purgatory or close to hell on earth. Red hot molten steel over the workers' heads. Chemicals in the air. Terrible place. My father succumbed to stomach cancer. I'm pretty sure it was from working in those conditions. Is there anything we can do to add on to help you with the safety? Because a part of economic development is keeping people here who want to be trained, want to join the unions. I can remember marching with my father. Marching didn't help too much back then because they could just hire another person if you quit or were fired. But they need safety. They want to know they have the job opportunity. They want to know they're protected there in the unions. Anything we could do to help you with those safety, even enhance it further for you, be happy to help.
I believe that there is opportunity. There is a labor committee and your rankings there, and I know that we have some legislative issues that we would like to go through, safety being one of them. Absolutely. If you could put better safeguards to protect our workers. Some employers need to get a little bit educated as well. I know we do that on our end. When there is a death on a job, I don't care if you're union or non-union. As a matter of fact, in Albany, a couple years ago, a young man lost his life. He was 18 years old. He fell through a set of scaffolding. I went to his wake. I did not represent this young man, but I went there because I felt the need to see what pain these people actually go through, so then I can make my mission that much stronger. I gave my condolences, and as a matter of fact, 10 of us went, because we felt compelled that no one should die in a job, union or non-union. So if there's anything you guys see coming down the pipeline to strengthen safety, by all means, I would support that. That's more important to me than anything else. You know, letting these people go home, because then we can tell them we have a great track record. Nobody gets hurt on our jobs. It happens. We understand that. There's minor injuries. But the big ones, we need to stay away from, and they can be avoided. Even silica stuff like that, dust in the air, those are simple remedies. Yeah, it costs more, but who cares?
He had asbestos in the air there.
Yeah.
They were just inhaling
It's terrible.
that and no protections whatsoever. But we've come a long way. But as you say, anything we can do, we certainly are there.
I'll tell you a quick story. I went on a union job, and one of the saws was spitting out dust. So, you know, as a union president, I knocked over the saw. It was a $3,500 saw. Not one person complained to me. My point was, fix it. Now it's broke. So I take it very seriously when I talk to people that are in the industry. then I'm not going to tolerate it, and neither should anybody else. So, yes, thank you for that.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for being here today. Next up, Aaron Wilson, co-founder of Herbie's Burgers. Probably something we all enjoy.
I had a couple. They're very good.
Yeah.
Senators, thanks for having me here. You know, a lot of people love to go out to eat, but we're not often invited to the table when it comes to any policy discussion. If you don't know, Herbie's Burgers is a smash burger, French fry, milkshake place, family-friendly spot. We try to source organic material, ingredients when we can, and we offer vegetarian and vegan options for everything, including milkshakes, which kind of sets us apart from the other burger, fry, shake places. We have 6 locations in the area, the Capital District, plus Clifton Park is on its way, and a spot in Williamsburg, Brooklyn is about to open as well. I could give you a TED Talk for 2 hours on how hard it is to run a restaurant, but I'm going to keep it short and just talk about affordability. The hardest part, one of the hardest parts about starting a restaurant is just getting open. The amount of red tape and bureaucracy you have to go through is astounding, and I don't really know how anyone does it, to be honest with you. Paperwork, applications, multiple fees, multiple trips to City Hall. You know, we're a small business. We're supposed to be at the restaurants. We don't really have time to be going back and forth with everyone. I'll give you one example because I'm going to pick on the one we just opened last week because it's freshest in my mind. You know, the town wanted a ground plan that has where our kitchen equipment's going to go, where the hood is, you know, where the tables are going to be, just to make sure everything is okay. And this place that we took over used to be a restaurant, so everything's pretty much there already. So, you know, I drew it out. On the landlord supplied me a drawing, and I drew it out on the drawing, and I handed it in. And they said, no, you got to get that stamped and signed by an architect. The only thing we were changing was we're building a counter so that people can come up to us and place an order. Luckily for me, my brother's an architect, so he helped me out, and we kind of moved along. But you know, and then later tonight at 6:00, I have to go to the same town. I have to go to a meeting about if our signage is appropriate that we have on our building. And look, I've been in the Capital District my whole life. I'm a white guy. I can't imagine what an immigrant coming from another country who usually they use a restaurant or hospitality to break into this country. I don't even know how they would navigate this system. And then on top of that, I think that restaurants are kind of on the front lines of the affordability crisis. We can kind of see it happening in real time, maybe before it hits the papers or hits the news. We like to have downtown locations because we want to support downtown Albany, downtown Schenectady, downtown Troy, downtown Saratoga. So out of our 6, we tend to shoot for downtown areas because we don't want to see the downtowns fail. But it seems like towns are begging people to open up in downtowns, and then when you say, okay, I'll do that, they try to stop you every way. Like, well, you need to get this permit, you got to get this inspection. Well, you know, I don't know I think your sign might be too big. You know? Meanwhile, a large business who has a skyscraper of lawyers and architects and engineers can just get through, pay the fines. They have the ability to just show up and take care of this stuff. But another thing about being in downtowns is that, you know, we are seeing homelessness on the rise. We are seeing crime on the rise. We are seeing the response times from police also going up. I'm seeing way more mental illness and drug addiction and people who just frankly can't afford to go to our little fast food restaurant anymore. And on top of that, you have our staff who obviously want a livable wage. They would like insurance. They would like childcare. And we would love to give them all those things, but then you're not going to come into my spot and buy a $45 burger now, are you? So from a state level, I'm not really sure what we can do about that, but I do want to touch on the fact that there's something going on out there, and we're seeing it every day, and it's not good.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate you being here and for your commitment to keeping your businesses here in the capital region going and expanding elsewhere. The issues that you had talked about that you're experiencing downtown, have you seen them, has that been a steady increase in terms of the vagrancy and the mental illness, or have you seen more pronounced acceleration recently?
It's probably been a steady incline. So we opened our very first restaurant on Lark Street in Albany during the pandemic, and there was a little bit here and there, but it seems like every week it gets a little bit worse. And now I'm having a problem where our staff, who are making, $17, $18 an hour, they're getting threatened. They feel bad because they can't give someone free food, because if we did that, it would start a whole chain of events. So they just say, never mind, I'm not going to work here anymore. And that's a huge cost to us, because payroll is the most expensive thing. And then training someone, you got 2 people on now instead of 1. And then that person just quit because they don't feel safe. And so now we got to hire somebody else. And so it is very difficult. But I think whatever is happening nationwide since we opened in 2020, 2021, it's been on a steady increase. Yeah.
It's interesting because I know that we've passed bills recently aimed to improve safety, panic button measures, these sort of things, and they may be helpful in providing protection, but they don't seem to be helping reduce the problem as well. Have you had conversations, similar conversations like this, at the local level with the mayor, with?
Yeah, we've had to deal with every municipality, and I understand where municipalities are coming from, but I wish that they would see our side of it too. I mean, we don't have the resources of a McDonald's or a Burger King to just come in and do our thing. We should be at the restaurants and not out fighting all these fights that are happening. So I get it, but it is. I just wish there was a little bit more leniency on us, because I do think we're a bit on the front lines of what is happening out in the world. Yeah.
Questions from my colleagues?
Yeah, I'm just be curious, what trends have you observed, or what's your experience been employee-wise? Recruitment, retention, attitude, the skills they bring, they stay in, or is it a high turnover? What have you seen as trends? Like, what as the employer, what are you seeing?
When we first opened, there was a lot of excitement, and we had a lot of people who wanted to work for us and show up, and they were a great crew. And then as time went on, as the more calls we had to make to the police, the more times I've had to turn over security footage to detectives. I kind of don't blame them for not sticking around. In general, even in a perfect world, I think there is a very high turnover, especially in our industry, where again we can't. I would love to pay someone $30 an hour, but it's not realistic. So yeah, I think there's huge turnover. Sometimes you don't even know why; they just don't show up.
Is that getting better or worse?
Worse, definitely worse. Yeah.
How long have you been in business, and would you say was COVID a turning point, or is this a more recent trend?
Well, we opened in COVID, and I think people were excited that something was happening, but it does seem over the past 5 years that it has gotten worse. Yeah.
Aaron, thank you for being here. You know what I hear over and over from small businesses, and I think I hear you saying this too. We kind of have a bureaucracy in here to the state that don't understand. I appreciate these $2 billion businesses, all these jobs, bing, bang, boom, all this. But the hard facts are, it's the small businesses collectively which make our economy roar. Collectively, they're going to create the jobs. And what I hear from you is what I hear over and over again. And I'll ask you this point blank. When you have a regulatory problem, I've had bartenders in the restaurants say there was a fly in one of our bottles. They closed us down for 2 weeks. Okay? Do they come in to penalize you, or do they come in to, they find something, help you solve a problem, at least on occasion, so you can get back into business, keep people working in your establishment? Because I'm hearing just the opposite now. Our regulators are coming in there, trying to find whatever. And my wife had a small business too, so I understand, and she went through it also.
Yeah.
But I ask you about that.
Yeah, well, every municipality is a little bit different, but some of these code enforcers, I think they think they're the police or something, and they come in hard and they scream at your face, and they're, one incident that happened, I wish our cameras were up.
Yeah.
But some are very nice, but for the most part, it just seems like, again, even though everybody wants these small businesses, they want them to thrive in downtown, it seems like they come at us from every direction until we say, we give up.
Yeah.
We're just going to close. I'm just going to get a 9 to 5.
Well, I'm not against big businesses, a lot of jobs, but they seem to be able to pay it away after and just keep going, rolling,
Yep.
pay a certain amount. But the small business can't pay it away.
Don't have the money, don't have the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate you being here and giving us some insight into what's going on in your industry and the downtown area as well. So next up, Bill Hammond, Senior Fellow for Health Policy at the Empire Center. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Senator, for having me. You started out this event by talking about the many ways in which New York has the worst costs for things. Healthcare is one of those areas. With respect to health insurance in particular, we have, in some respects, the highest premiums for health insurance. And most people, I don't think most people even know what their health insurance costs, because most people either they get it, like a third of the population is getting their health care purchased by Medicaid, which is no cost to the consumer, or they're on Medicare. The ones who are cutting the checks, the ones who actually pay the premium, usually the employers, and sometimes union benefit funds. And so they know how much it costs, but they're not the ones who are choosing the doctor and choosing which procedures to get. So there's a disconnect there. But the average insurance in New York State for an individual is about $10,000, and for a family it's about $26,000. And that's just a lot of money. That's one of the, if you were trying to put that into your family budget, that would be one of the most expensive things you were paying for. As our system has evolved, it's the employer pays most of it. You chip in, maybe 15, 20% of it. But that cost still comes down, it comes out of your compensation. So it's still coming down on you as the resident of New York State. And those averages are for all size employers. Small employers pay an even higher premium. The average premium in New York State is 13% higher than the average. For small employers, it's another 5 or 10 points on top of that. So a lot of the reason why healthcare is expensive all over the country, and a lot of the reason why health insurance is expensive is because it's paying the doctor bills and the hospital bills, which are expensive. But there are things that are done to the health insurance industry, specifically by the state, that are driving the cost higher than it needs to be. And there are two things in particular that I would point out. One is that the state taxes health insurance. And I don't think people are necessarily aware of that. There's a law called the Healthcare Reform Act that was passed in 1996. So it's just about, what would that make it, 30 years old? And that law includes a couple of what are called surcharges on healthcare that are paid by the health insurance company. And it's one of the largest sources of revenue that the state has. It brings in $5 or $6 billion a year. And that adds approximately 5% to your typical premium. So that's $500 a person or $1,400 a family. And that's the state imposing a tax on your health care. And they're doing it, ironically, they're doing it in the name of affordability, because they use that money to pay for Medicaid, which is free health insurance for people who can't afford it. I think that's just the wrong way to pay for Medicaid. But that is one very concrete thing that the state does that adds, like I say, about 5% to the cost of health insurance. And that's 5% to the premiums that are being paid primarily by businesses. The other thing that the state does is that it, again, in the name of affordability, it tells insurers what they have to cover. And so insurers always have to cover what's considered medically necessary. And there's a lot of law around what medically necessary means. But in addition to that, the state comes in and says, you have to cover chiropractic, or you have to cover, one that was recently added was, now I'm drawing a blank, it's something like art therapy. A new type of provider that insurers have not been covering in the past, they now have to provide coverage for. Another type of coverage mandate says you can't do cost sharing for this particular service or product. One that recently the state added was asthma inhalers. Insurers have to provide at least a certain minimum number of asthma inhalers for each patient with no cost sharing. Now that makes the asthma inhalers more affordable for that patient, but it makes insurance less affordable for the whole state. Back in 2003, there was a study done about these coverage mandates, and they estimated at that time that the ones that were in existence back then added about 12% to premium. That was, a quarter century ago. The state's been adding more mandates since. And so chances are that cost has increased too. Again, that's being done in the name of affordability. Too often, I think, when we talk about affordability in a political context, we're not talking about making the product or service inherently less expensive. We're talking about subsidizing it. We're talking about shifting the cost from one consumer to another payer. And so if we're looking to make health insurance affordable, I guess I should have mentioned that those mandates I mentioned, the coverage mandates about the inhalers and the art therapy, those don't apply to most large employers, because large employers are self-insured. It's a technical term. And under federal law, self-insured businesses are not subject to state regulation. So those state regulations primarily affect small business. And that's one reason why the premiums for small business are higher than they are for large business. So these are things that the state could directly do immediately. They could roll back the taxes under the Healthcare Reform Act. They could rethink some of those mandates. I'm not saying we should get rid of all of them, but one very good idea that has been on the table in the past is to have a cost effectiveness commission, a commission that would look at proposed mandates, weigh whether they're providing enough benefit for the cost, and either get rid of them or don't put them in the first place. So thank you.
Really appreciate that, Bill. And to your point, the taxing of plans, the taxing of care is something that we see grow with the MCO tax last year. And in the name of affordability, it doesn't seem to be having that desired effect. So thank you for continuing to make that point, and in a very precise way. Questions for my colleagues?
Yeah, Bill, inhalers, art programs, other enhancements for health, they sound good. But the money ends up going around to come around to make it a state that's unaffordable. That's part of the problem, wouldn't you say? How about a means test on these new things? If you're making $1 million, $2 million, when you get that inhaler, you pay 80% of it, okay? If you're in a lower income area, maybe you pay $10 for it, or $5 or $3. Wouldn't that make more sense and make it more affordable, I think, if we had a real means test but understood even the impact of where you put those means levels? Would that be helpful?
That is, I mean, that's a point I've sometimes made when I write about these mandates, that they apply equally across everybody who works for a particular business. Yeah. So an asthma inhaler may be tough to afford for the counter worker at a hamburger place, but not so hard to afford for the CEO of a law firm. But they're both getting the same deal. Means testing would be another layer of bureaucracy, and so I don't think that's a good approach. The low-income people in this state, about a third of the state, and it's actually more like 35% of the state, are getting Medicaid or the essential plan. And in those plans, the cost sharing is very minimal. And so if you're really low income, chances are regardless of these coverage mandates, you're paying very little or nothing for your cost sharing.
How about, this is an affordability hearing. We'll talk about how we can keep people here. How about spending in New York State? Do we have any problems with spending in New York State? Any priorities that we're missing here? I think I've had conversations with you about football fields that cost $600 million. Don't get me wrong, I like the Bills, okay?
Yes.
But this guy's a billionaire. He needs $600 million to play 9 games in Buffalo. Somebody who lives there, I understand that. $800 million for Hollywood moguls to come here for tax credits. I think you guys said that was the worst investment, or one of the worst investments in tax credits. $800 million. It gives us no return. I think we could do a better job of priorities in some ways.
Definitely. There are a lot of programs that are done in the name of economic development, tax credits and subsidies that are not a worthwhile investment. And also they involve picking and choosing between businesses. So a hamburger restaurant does not qualify for a $22 billion subsidy, which is what Micron is getting. If you add up the federal, state, and local benefits that Micron is getting, it's kind of mind-boggling.
So we know where the real beef is. It's not necessarily in the hamburger place. Yeah. Thank you.
Bill, thanks for being here. I've seen this in my district, and I know it's a statewide phenomenon right now with the contractual disputes between healthcare providers and insurers. And I'm just curious, your perspective. Would you put the blame more on one side than the other? Are these all similar, or are they all different? Who's being the more difficult of the pair? And then maybe to give you an out, would you say there's like a more outside global phenomenon that's driving this difference between the providers and the insurers?
So this is a big downside of a third-party payer system, that we don't have ownership of our own health insurance. I mean, we pay the premium, but we don't have control over the relationship with the provider. The third party is the one who has to negotiate sort of on our behalf to get the best prices. Every one of these disputes is unique. In some cases, I might sympathize with one side or the other. I think in general, the insurance company is the one who's fighting for lower costs because that's their role in the system. They take a lot of heat. They get a lot of bad publicity. They're one of the least popular industries out there. But that's partly because they're the one player in the system that's incentivized to say no. You know, when the providers are ordering lots of tests or recommending lots of procedures or just jacking up the price for everything, the only player in the system that has an incentive to tell them not to do that is the insurance plan. And that's where those fights come from.
It's a good question, and it's something that we've experienced, I think, here in the Capital Region frequently, and we've drafted legislation to remedy that. I'd be interested to hear your take on it at some point. So
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Bill. Last but certainly not least, Gavin Donahue, president of IPNY. Energy, certainly something that is having an impact on all of these industries and the residents here in the Capital District. So Gavin, thanks for your leadership in this domain, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Senators, for having me. Just real quickly, I represent over 90 companies that are in the actual electricity generation field. I don't represent National Grid and the utilities. They're on the transmission and distribution side. As an economic force, we pay across the state over $1.5 billion of property taxes and income taxes in the state, and employ about 20,000 people, a lot of folks that work with Pat. Before I get into my uplifting message, building upon Bill's concerns about insurance, I want to say I believe in the goals of the clean energy transition, and working with you as friends and as legislators. I know you guys do as well. It's just how do you get there and how do you do it in a way that's realistic? And this state missed the boat on that. We, in 2019, with a lot of fanfare, passed a climate law in New York State and I'll just quickly describe it, to reduce air emissions in the state, which is laudable. 70% of our electricity by 2030 should be renewable, zero emitting electricity by 2040, and an 85% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2050. Unfortunately, there was no money attached to that bill. This was to change the whole economy of the state of New York and how we generate electricity, and there was no allocation of funds to do that. So everybody in this room and around this table are paying probably 5 to 8% of their electricity bill today to comply with those mandates. This is an upstate New York area. I'm proud to say I've lived here my whole life. We are carbon-free in upstate New York. We today in Troy are on nuclear energy, some gas, but primarily hydroelectricity. Where the problem exists on electricity production and pollution are in low-income areas in New York City, Long Island, and some in Westchester. Just by a benchmark, 89% of today's electricity in New York City is generated on oil and gas, and the oil is heavily polluting. So when you can't get the gas, you have to burn the oil to keep the lights on. So we have health impacts that are real. My point in saying all this is we passed a state law to ratchet down emissions, but we're already carbon-free in upstate New York. So this is detrimental, in my opinion, to investment in New York State. We have, across New York State, I think the mayor hit it, we've ignored the infrastructure. For the last 10 years, we really haven't invested in the transmission system or the generation system. We've talked about building laudable, expensive, intermittent renewable energy products, but not really gotten down to what keeps the lights on. What is economic? What are the physics, and what do the grid require? I mean, this legislation that was passed with no analysis as to whether the grid can control or handle these types of investments. As a result of data centers, economic development, the change that we've seen in investment, we have to build this grid out 111 gigawatts more just on the generation side. And for those of you that are not in the business, 1 gigawatt is 750,000 homes. So think about that. And then on the transmission system, to achieve these goals, we have to build that system out 3 to 4 times larger than it is. And I already see folks struggling for their electricity bills. You folks know all the folks that are in arrears on their electricity bills. So those are real problems in the state. And I think a theme that I took away from today is if you said to me what was the biggest thing we could do as a state to help, it would be, whether it's the hamburger business or electricity business, we need regulatory reform. You cannot get permits in New York State. I don't care what it is. You could get an award from NYSERDA to build a solar farm, but then you can't get the wetlands permit from DEC. That is a huge problem. The fact that we don't have everybody on the same sheet music as it relates to electricity and issuing permits. But I went back and looked at some of the legislative initiatives that you have taken on as leadership. And I want to get back to affordability because we're talking about a new nuke. I think a new nuke would be great in New York State. It's going to take a very long time. And make no mistake about it, it's going to be very expensive. So it really is not consistent with the idea of affordability. But there's 2 bills I'd like to mention that Senator Ashby has, Senator Tedisco, and Steck, that would allow the DEC to temporarily suspend or modify greenhouse gas emissions if it finds that the limits would impede reliability or increase utility rates more than 5%. That gets to affordability. That's a bill that should receive further consideration. And there's another bill that Senator Ashby and Tedisco have that would allow personal income tax credit for the amount of utility costs paid above the prior three-year average of their electricity bills. Those would give rate relief to folks across New York State. And I really think that it's important to look at pieces of legislation that are pending. Those bills need further consideration. There was no cost study done on the CLCPA. I think in upstate New York, and I sat on the Climate Council, just so folks know, to retrofit your house to comply with the CLCPA, and a house that was studied in Utica, New York, would cost $25,000 to $50,000 to retrofit it to comply with that law. I don't know where the folks are going to get their money to pay for that, because as I indicated, we didn't have money in that bill. So those are real costs. I think it's great that Governor Hochul is talking about all of the above approach. It's a little late, but it's a good message but if all of the above is true, we really need to be all of the above. And we need to actually permit things and build things to address the economic needs we have and reliability needs. So I could get into much more, but that's a quick summary of where things stand.
Thanks, Gavin. Really appreciate your time and effort on this. And when you talk about permit reform and greater regulatory reform, in looking at the CLCPA and its impact, do you believe that it should just be repealed, or do you think that we can, or it should just be retooled?
I don't think
Can and should are different
Yeah.
in terms of the legislators that are in office right now and the leadership's appetite for that. But to speak of what you think should be done.
There's provisions in the law that would allow the Public Service Commission to waive the requirements of this law. But that takes political courage to direct the PSC to say, hey, we're going to waive these requirements. I don't think it's realistic to sit here based on the political structure of the state in an election year to say we're going to amend this law. I just don't think there's an appetite for it on the Democratic side to do that. But there is a off-ramp where reliability and affordability are jeopardized. The Public Service Commission could waive the requirements. That would be an immediate thing that they could do to address the requirements of this law. Because the problem is you can't get the permits. And when you have private businesses that have capital, they look at New York State and say, well, I could go to Ohio and not deal with these 10 other requirements that we have here. One of the things that I'll briefly mention in New York City, I mentioned how it's 89% of the electricity is on oil and gas. The units to keep the lights on in New York City are 50 to 70 years old. At some point, something is going to happen. And when you say to New York folks, we're not going to allow you to burn any fossil fuels, I don't know how you keep the lights on in places like the South Bronx, Brooklyn, Midtown Manhattan. This is a looming problem for the state on that, just the age of the system. And New York City is the biggest problem right now for reliability. We're fortunate upstate. We have excess capacity, and we have some really strong, new, clean, efficient units. But the off-ramp that's in current law could be executed if the governor wanted to.
Gavin, you mentioned, I missed a percentage of the impact that the CLCPA is already having on electric bills. I think probably the number one most frequent call, if I was going to classify the calls into my office that I get asking questions or making complaints or looking for help, we get an awful lot of people complaining about their electric bill. Now, do you know what is the projection? If we're up 5-10% now because of the CLCPA, when we get into full-blown construction, build out of everything that's going to be required to eventually meet all that, I don't know what election we're trying to get past before we actually start to hang meat on the bone here. But eventually they're going to have to either follow through with the law or scrap it. But how much higher can people expect this to be? And is it fair? It seems like a lot of our colleagues want to use the Public Service Commission as the scapegoat, that these aren't going up because of policy changes in Albany or law changes in Albany. These are going up because the utility companies are greedy or the Public Service Commission isn't doing their job. I mean, what's the straight answer to the ratepayer that's starting to get upset with their electric bill?
Excellent question. The typical electricity customer in the National Grid service territory, 70% of your electricity bill is taxes, delivery, transmission, and public policy initiatives. 30% today is what I represent as the supply side. Now, the cost of gas has gone down, so the 30% could fluctuate. Those numbers could fluctuate. The reality is, and that's why I started out saying we pay over $1.5 billion in property taxes. It's no different than what Bill deals with in the healthcare field. We are a cash cow for the state of New York, and they sink in all these taxes into the electricity bills to hide it in the utility bills. It is a huge problem in New York State, but 70% of your bill is, and this is not a slight at utilities, because their job is as complicated as our job in keeping the lights on. But the state of New York has added all these costs, whether it's a regional greenhouse gas cost, whether it's a tax program for the RPS, all these things are in your bill. I do this for a living. I look at my electricity bill, I don't even understand it. I mean, these charges are above and beyond what should be on their bill. And the other thing that I would say is that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, while it's a laudable goal on carbon emissions, has collected about $3 billion in the state. We're the only state in the RGGI Compact in the Northeast that doesn't rebate consumers for paying for that. California does, but why don't we give money back to ratepayers as a mechanism? So that's something else that could be looked at. You have the Clean Energy Fund that is collecting money on all of our bills every month, and there's real questions as to whether these projects will ultimately be built. So the question becomes, should we still be collecting those fees? And I think that that's coming into this legislative session, something that the legislature needs to really think about. Is it fair to collect fees on New Yorkers when we know we're not going to build these things? So I don't know if I answered your question, Tim.
Respectfully, I don't think so. All right, let me try again. Let me apologize. Let me rephrase though, Gavin. Thank you for your expertise and your leadership over the years on these issues, not just today. Is the Public Service Commission the bad guy, or is it the state government the bad guy when people are starting to complain about their electric bills?
I think the state of New York has put in laws, then they do not put the money to implement the laws, and then they say, well, I gave you a law to do and you didn't implement it correctly. Well, it was never going to be implemented correctly. Perfect example is the CLCPA. I know you voted no. The reality is there was no money allocated for the bill. So we do that on all these programs, and we take credit as a legislature of it. So it's one program after another, and that 5% becomes 1% on top of that, and it adds up, as you know, over time. So I think unfunded mandates on top of regulatory reform are a huge thing, and it's a huge thing for the mayor and Manans too. All these unfunded mandates and requirements on small business are just out of control in the state.
Respond to what the senator's getting at.
Did I get to the question and answer?
Yeah, I think you did. But
It did.
let me just say thank you for exposing the fact that part of this affordability part, a huge part, is our energy issues here, and the direction we've been going, and the rhetoric we've been using, which sounds so glorious and so beautiful, and I wish it was a reality, but it's not a reality, really. We can do some of these things in the future, but they have to be planned out to bring the economy, to bring the workers, to bring the technology. It can't just happen because there's an election coming up. This is election rhetoric, and now we've got the backpedaling of the election rhetoric. We're holding off on some of these things, but who knows what's going to happen after the next election. But to the senator's point, you mentioned the two bills that we have,
Yeah.
which I think would be sustaining going forward. It's not like giving somebody a Christmas present of a $200 check and then goodbye, there's the affordability problem, we've solved it. That's realistic. This is a huge issue for the ratepayers and to pay these energy costs. But to the point here, yes, they are faceless bureaucrats who are not elected, who don't know how to say no. Go back and do your job right. Because you can't give a rate increase if the legislature's not doing their job right, so people can have an affordability issue that they can sustain. So I have a bill. You probably are familiar with it. Some of my colleagues are supporting it. It's a very simple bill. You want a public service commission? They're the professionals you want to evaluate and look at this. Then it should come back to us for ratification of a rate increase. And then the people who go back to the public and are responsible elected officials could say, this is the reason why we needed that rate increase. It was for your good. But now that people, oh, those darn well, you appointed those public service commissioners. If you don't think they're doing their job properly and it's really their fault, but if you want to ratify it, bring it back to us and then we'll ratify the rates.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair for the public.
There needs to be more transparency, there's no doubt about it. But keep in mind, when the Public Service Commission was set up initially under Governor Mario Cuomo, it was to maintain that independence so that the elected official didn't get tagged with the 8% utility bill increase. So it was set up in a way to keep elected officials out of it. I understand your bill. I agree with the transparency notion because it is all a game, and all this money's going into pots that nobody can track. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Thanks, Gavin. Well, before we close, I just had one more question I wanted to get around to with Pat. If you were to ask your union membership what their top priority for state elected officials would be, what do you think their response would be?
I guess it depends on who you ask. So what I try to do to my membership is to say to them, I represent you in labor issues. There's a lot of social issues that I don't touch with them, and for many reasons. But the labor issues is where I'm elected for. So when they ask me if they can help with health care, I say, we're talking to our professionals and see how we can keep the costs down. If they ask me about their pensions, I talk to the investment people to make sure we get our returns so they can have their pension. Work is always top priority for them. If they're working, they don't have time to be on Facebook or social media causing all kinds of havoc because they're working. So the top priority for them is to work. And if I can ensure their ability to go to work every day, provide for their families, or maybe buy their new four-wheeler, that kind of thing, then they're happy. But when the work dries up, there's nothing worse for a construction person to have his time on their hands. And so our message to them is, we are trying our hardest to keep you working. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I think this was a great discussion. From my perspective, it was great to have you all in the room together to hear the similarities and some of the differences in what you're facing. And certainly the regulatory reform is a message that continues to ring home. So thank you for being here. And if we can be helpful going forward, certainly reach out to us. Don't let this be the last correspondence that we have. Continue this conversation as we go on. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.